Hello again, it's Connie, and today we're going to be talking about me as a blind mom. And I have a lot to say, so I'm going to keep my introductory remarks and such to a minimum. So I just want to remind you all to tell your friends about this channel and share the videos, share the links, and be sure to subscribe and like and all that good stuff. That really helps the logarithm to share it with more people and everything. And my recent videos brought back some good memories and some not so good memories, some sad memories, but sometimes it's okay to reflect upon um, sad times and learn and grow from them. But they were about me as a caretaker for my parents in their last days of life. And there is a part one and a part two for those, so be sure to check those out. And you can find my channel. It's called Gliding Through Blindness. Um, so you can find all my videos and stuff there. And with that, I'll just get started with today's topic by saying that when my daughter, my firstborn, came into the world, she unfortunately had to stay in the hospital for the first 10 days of her life because she had some fluid in her lungs and it was hard for her to breathe. So I think she probably could have gotten out sooner than she did, but my impression was that the staff at the hospital were kind of wondering about me as a blind mom and my ability to take care of my daughter and so forth. But she did get to come home eventually, and one of the first things, of course, that any parent should have is a baby monitor. And there was one in Carissa's room, the microphone, and then speakers. We had speakers all throughout the house, like in the living room and bedroom and everything, so I could hear whenever she was crying. Um, and I was a stay at home mom, so I had her all to myself during the daytime and was the primary caregiver. Like I changed her, fed her bottle when she was an infant, and then other food as she got older, and bathed her, all that. And so a lot of the tips, like specific tricks and stuff that I use, I've probably forgotten by now, but there are other channels that deal with this topic from blind moms who actually have young kids and have YouTube channels. Of course, YouTube wasn't a thing yet back when my kids were born, but um, when the kids got old enough to start eating solid foods, which could probably stir up a debate, but I basically used the child-led weaning approach, which I didn't even know that was a term. It was just what I did, and then I found out later that other people did it as well. It was a common practice, probably not as common as the alternative, where people seem to think it's vital to start feeding your child, like get them on solids as quickly as possible. And I think the reason for that is to just introduce them to different tastes and textures. And if you only introduce one food at a time, you can better figure out if they might be allergic to foods. But fortunately, I didn't have any of those issues. So I just basically skipped the entire first stage. And that would have been really hard for me to feed that runny food to my kids. So I just waited until they were actually able to eat tiny bites of food, um, like that were more solid. And I put cereal in their bottle before that so that they had a little more in there than just formula. So that kind of helped to round out their needs as their appetites increased and everything. Um, and I fed them facing outward. So that might be counterintuitive for some of you, but being blind, it was just what came naturally, um, because I just that was the way I was facing myself. So I could easily, like, they were sitting on my lap instead of in a high chair. That would have been a lot more difficult, I think, for me to try to find their mouth when they weren't right there. But since they were like up against my chest or whatever, I could easily find where their mouth was. And if they ever watch this, they might not like this or be aware of it, but I would feed them with my fingers mostly. um, I just found that to be a lot less messy and easier. So they had these like hot dog shaped things that were kind of mushy. They were baby food, but they were easy for me to just pick off a little bite of that, or whatever it might be, Cheerios, or just little pieces of carrot, like um, boiled carrots and things like that, that could be were soft enough for them to eat, but yet solid enough for me to pick up. And another thing I did was to um, dress them the same way, with facing outward. And I would like put their shirt and pants or whatever, their dress, or in the case of my daughter, whatever the case was, instead of having the child face me, which I'm sure is probably what most sighted people do, I had them facing the same way that I was myself, and just put them on my lap and would do it that way, which I found a lot easier. And I'm really curious, for those of you who are blind, what you found to be the easiest. And I hope you can hear over all that commotion. Um, and I would pin their clothes together, to if there were matching outfits. But for the most part, I just tried to find clothes that would pretty much go with anything. And of course, when we were just at home, I didn't really worry if their clothes matched or not. But also, there's a lot of onesies and little sleepers and stuff that where the outfit is just all in one. So I use those a lot of times too. And fortunately, we were given a lot of clothes, so we didn't have to buy a lot, because they grow out of them so quickly at that age. And so I'm what else did I remember about that time? I put When they were old enough to start crawling and walking more, I put bells on their shoes so I could hear where they were. And I had a hand holder, is the politically correct term, I guess, for my daughter, which one end would be around my wrist, and then the other end would be around my daughter's wrist, so that she could walk independently instead of hanging onto my hand all the time. That would give her a little more leeway and stuff, but yet I could still keep track of where she was when we were out and about. And so a really handy item that I used when I became knew that a second kid was on the way. I was trying to figure out ways that I could have both of them at the same time, and I didn't really like front packs or backpacks. They were just more bulky than I would have preferred, and more uh, what's the word, just harder to, just more complicated to put them in there and all that. And I happened to hear about something that's not as common. I don't know if it is now or not, but back in the day, not many people use them, but it's called a sling for a baby sling. And it basically looks like a lot like a sling that you would have if you like broke your arm or something, except instead of your arm laying in front of you, it was the baby. And it just had like a cross shoulder or cross body strap that I would put on my shoulder, but then the bigger part, the wide part, would be in front of me, and I just would lay my son in there. And then as he grew older, I could face him toward me, or in a more sitting position, or face outward too. So there was a lot of flexibility in like the position that he could be in, which helped my like arms if I would get tired or whatever, to just have him in a little different and more variety for him as well. He could, if he was facing outward, he could see what was ahead of him and stuff. And then I would have my daughter by the hand, and so one hand would be like shielding the baby's head, and if I was by myself, I would have my cane in the other hand. But if I had my daughter, um, I would just rely on her sight. Fortunately, she was old enough by then; she was 5. So that was how we would do it back in the day. And um, so I would take Carissa to a couple of activities every week that were kind of like preschool um, type settings where she could learn basic and like be around other kids. Mainly it was for socialization. um, and so we did that for several years until she aged out of those programs, got too old for them. And I had CDs that was when the computer was starting to be a thing. In fact, I remember marveling at how cool it was that I could like shop for a baby sling online, and just the ability to do that, because nobody had ever heard of shopping online really before that. So that was one of my first experiences with doing that, and I was able to get a lot of their birthday and Christmas presents online too, which was really nice to be able to just do that from home independently without having to drag them to a store or whatever. And then when the neighbor boy started kindergarten, he was a couple years younger than her, and she would play with him quite a bit. But when he started school, I knew I would have to think of more ways to keep her socialized and give her opportunities to play with other kids. And so I started homeschooling other people's children. And there were 4 of them that I had for several years, 5 years, and they were very well behaved, which I'm grateful for. And so 'cause they were all different ages and grade levels, so a couple of them weren't even in school yet. So I had like a toddler, two or like preschooler, couple toddlers, and then the older ones, 3 older ones that were actually in school, so to speak. So yeah, those were some fun times. Of course, there were some stressful times too, and there are some things that I wish I had done differently that we will probably go into more in subsequent videos. Just about my conservative, very conservative worldview that I had back then. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with Growing Kids God's Way, but I was really into that back in the day. And I would do a lot of that differently now if I had it to do again. But of course, you don't get any redos, unfortunately. And with my daughter, especially being the oldest, I think I put more, well, I know I did actually, but I put more pressure on her than I should have, because I just wanted her to be perfect. And just knew that any mistakes or whatever, or any misbehavior on her part, I was afraid would get credited to the fact that I was blind and didn't know how to take care of her properly or whatever. So I shouldn't have worried about that nearly as much as I did. Um, it's always a good policy not to worry too much about what other people are going to think, or what they think of your choices or whatever. I mean, you have to consider other people to some extent, just in your daily life. No man is an island, as they say, but yet you can definitely take it to extremes as well. Um, and so, um, what time is it getting to be here? Okay, so yeah, some interesting things about them having a blind mom is that they did not look directly at people, which was brought to my attention by others, that I wasn't even aware of, because of course I would look toward them when I talked to them, and so they would face the person, but just that actual eye contact they didn't have, because of course I didn't use eye contact with them. And an interesting thing about my son, he was left-handed, like he ate with his left hand, learned how to write with his left hand, and I was not even aware of that until a lot later, which is probably a good thing. I don't think I would have tried to make him be right-handed like a lot of parents unfortunately did back then. And I guess there are some benefits to being in a right-handed world, but I'm glad that I just let him be as far as that, because I mean, he learned to write very legibly, and all that, so it was never a hang up for him in the least. But it's just funny that I wasn't even aware that he was left-handed until after he was already like way well on his way to learning his letters and stuff like that. I forgot now how I even did learn it. I'm sure somebody just mentioned it at some point, but um, like when they would draw pictures for me and stuff, I would just ask them, "Cool, what's this part right here, and what did you draw for me?" And have them describe it as best as they could without like being annoying about it, like asking for every detail. But um, that's what I would how I would handle more visual things like that before they were like literally aware that I couldn't see. But subconsciously they were aware of it, because like they knew somehow that like if they wanted to show me something, they had to take my hands, um and for me and have me touch it, whereas other people, they could like show them something from across the room. And so yeah, it's just interesting how kids just pick up subconsciously on stuff like that. And so um and that still comes in handy when kids, like a lot of times my son will still just grab my arms to show me something that would be really impossible for me to pick up nearly as easily just by verbalizing. Like he was building or looking at how to build a table the other day, that rotates, and he was just describing to me how like the different gears worked. Like if you turn this part up here, it makes that part down there rotate in this certain way. And it would just been very hard to explain, without that mental picture of him just actually like showing me with my hands how the parts move together and stuff. And so in our homeschool, we would often utilize techniques like that, and I noticed that like them having to verbalize more, like their math lessons and stuff like that, um, they it helped them as much as it did me, because often they would catch their own mistakes in the process of working it out loud. Oh, I should have done that or whatever. So that was a plus to just learning those verbal skills. And some rules I had, like I insisted that the kids answered me when I called them, no matter where they were or whatever, and that I needed to know that information right away when I would call to monitor where everybody was at any given time. And yeah, I don't want this to get too long, so I think I will draw this to a close there. But oh yeah, one other thing, interesting tidbit about them being homeschooled, is that a lot of times they would not know what grade they were in. because we never worried about that, like being done with this book by the end of the year. It was just everybody learned at their own pace. If they needed extra time, they would just get it. If they were really interested in a topic, we would spend more time on it. And so I never like gave them letter grades as such either. I never gave them like A or B or C. We would just keep on with the task until they learned it. So that was an interesting aspect there, like that when they thought it was kind of funny that my kids didn't they had to stop and ask me, what grade am I in, mom? And then I had to stop and think too, because it just wasn't anything that we really cared about much, because a lot of times they were several grades ahead in a topic, or like if they needed more help they might be a little behind in a subject area or whatever. And so yeah, they're just unique things from that perspective as well. um, but I will be talking a lot more about these things in the days ahead, and I hope you found this helpful. And I will see you on the next video. Bye for now.